Order. I call this meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee on Human Resources. My name is Chris Palmer, MLA for Kings West and the chair of this committee. Today, in addition to reviewing appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions, we will hear from Nourish, Nova Scotia, the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, and Calvin Presbyterian Church regarding school breakfast programs. At this time, I would like all who are here in the committee room to please put your phones on silent. And once we get that done, I will go to our committee members and ask them to introduce themselves for the record by stating their name and constituency. We'll begin with MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Melissa Sheehy-Richard, and I'm the MLA for Hants West.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dave Ritzie, MLA for Truro Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Good afternoon. John A. McDonald, MLA for Hants East.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Kent Smith. I am the MLA for the Eastern Shore.
Lisa LaChance, MLA Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Kendra Coombs, MLA Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier. It's lovely to see you all.
Good afternoon, Laura Lee Nickel, MLA for Cole Harbour, Dartmouth.
Good afternoon and welcome, Tony Ince, MLA for Cole Harbour.
Thank you, committee members, and for the purposes of Hansard, I recognize the presence of Legislative Counsel Gordon Hebb to my right and Legislative Committee Clerk Judy Kavanaugh to my left. As per the protocol of our committee, we will begin with agency, board, and commission appointments. So we'll ask for a motion from MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Department of Advanced Education, I move to recommend that Chercy Hart be appointed Governor of Mount St. Vincent University Board of Governors.
Motion on the table. Is there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is passed. MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Department of Agriculture, I move to recommend that Rachel Chevry be appointed a member, designated Vice Chair of the Nova Scotia Crop and Livestock Insurance Commission.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA McDonald.
For the Department of Agriculture, I move to recommend Gloria Thyssen be appointed a member, Department of Agriculture, Keith Fuller be appointed a member, AAFC, and Dr. Scott White be appointed a member, Dalhousie University Agricultural Campus for the Weed Control Advisory Committee.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA McDonald.
Long list, Mr. Chair. For the Department of Community, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, I move to recommend John David Briggs, Jim Mills, Nicola Ray Smith, and Catherine Woodman be appointed Directors of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia Board of Directors.
Motion on the table. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA McDonald.
For the Department of Community, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, I move to recommend John Watson and Leah Allen Walsh be appointed members of the Sherbrooke Restoration Committee.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA McDonald.
For the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, I move to recommend Pamela Tooney be appointed Mi'kmaq member, Straight SR, on the Council of Mi'kmaq Education.
Motion on the table. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Department of Environment and Climate Change, I move to recommend that Obogo Kalu be appointed member of the Round Table on Environment and Sustainable Prosperity.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA Sheehy-Richard.
For the Department of Health and Wellness, I move to recommend Muhammad as Rasho Pero to Dukeil be and Arlene Williams be appointed public representative to the Board of Nova Scotia College of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA Sheehy-Richard.
For the Department of Health and Wellness, I move to recommend Matthew Crossman be appointed public representative to the Registration Appeal Committee of the Nova Scotia Board of Examiners and Psychology.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Last one, Mr. Chair. For the Department of Justice, I move to recommend P. Earl Muse be appointed a member of the Nova Scotia Accessibility Advisory Board.
Motion on the table. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. That concludes our appointments to boards and commissions and agencies. Just a little bit of correspondence or committee business, and I can ask our committee business. I know we have some things to discuss at the end of this time with our witnesses. I also want to draw attention to our committee members, the letter received to our committee from Christina King. You might have all received that. And is there any questions about this? MLA Coombs.
Yes, I would like to register my deepest, concerns that the fact that I think the whole idea was how are they going to promote more diversity into the ABCs, and it doesn't seem to be any real plans to how to do that. There's nothing there that welcomes people, so there's nothing such as looking at if we want to see more regional diversity, or even with people with disabilities who cannot often drive to Halifax, nothing to talk about Zoom meetings, virtual meetings, nothing in there that talks about people with children who might want to participate but cannot due to childcare constraints. There's nothing there about going into community. Yes, it puts on the MLAs to promote, but there's nothing about the actual ABC board or the commission going into community to actually invite people to apply for the ABCs. And I think that, so I don't feel like the correspondence actually deals with what we were asking for. It doesn't ask for what their plans are to create diversity. And in order to create diversity, you have to make people feel welcome. In order to make people feel welcome, you have to assess what people need and the type of groups and organizations that you want to have at the table and have represented. So I think that I would request that maybe we want to send a letter back asking for an actual plan to create diversity within the ABCs.
Thank you, MLA Coombs. MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just if my colleague Russ, since it was actually raised by a member who's not here, if we could, like, on the next meeting when the member's here who raised it, if we can find out what his view onto it too was. I totally agree with the letter, but I'd really like to have MLA Duvall be here since he's the one who brought it, if my colleague across would agree.
Thank you. MLA Ince, did you have a comment?
I do. Thank you. I can understand and I appreciate the letter that was sent. But again, the challenge with trying to make these ABCs more diverse and inclusive is the lack of consultations and meetings in the communities. Many community members don't trust the process as it is right now. So how can you move forward and try to do, act as everything is status quo when you need the involvement of community and those individuals who don't feel that they are a part of this process? So I would ask that we follow my colleague, Ms. Coombs, with a letter. I'm from the community. My colleague who put the request forward and I have both discussed these issues. So I leave it at that.
Okay. MLA Coombs, to close discussion on this.
Just to say that with my Liberal colleagues agreeing that the letter should be written, I will formalize a motion that we write a letter asking for plans on how on how they're going, on how the department is, or the organization, Executive Council Office particularly, is going to go about promoting diversity in the ABC appointments. And a follow-up with that is to include our letter that we attached prior for context.
Thank you. So I guess my suggestion might be, if we have general agreement around the table, we don't need to put a motion forward. So do we have general agreement around the table that we will send a follow-up letter? Yeah. Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay. As per our other committee business, I think what we'll do is we'll defer that till after the end of our time with our witnesses today, so we can have a good, healthy conversation here, and then we will move on to our other committee business at the time. MLA Coombs.
So with that deferral, Chair, as you've alluded to with us today, we have members of QP 5047 representing over 1,800 striking school support workers in HRM. This work action is in its 4th week, 1 month, and these workers are rightfully looking for answers from this government and specifically from the department. Therefore, I ask that the committee extend this meeting to 3:30 p.m. to allow us to have that discussion.
So is that an ask, or are you putting a motion
The
forward?
motion.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that? MLA Nicol.
I just want to add that we are in full support of this and had planned to move something similarly in an effort to work together for all the students who are being impacted by this government. Everyone feels that they're being neglected at this time, and so I support the NDP to explore what the government can do to have an emergency meeting, to have this discussion. It's over time. It's overdue.
Okay, so is there any discussion? And, oh, sorry, MLA Lachance.
Thank you. So I would like to speak in favor of this as well. I mean, I think we're really at an emergency state where students have been out of school for far too long. You know, when I think about this situation, and I think back to my own experience with my son, where we relied on EPA support for many years of elementary school, a disruption like this is a disruption in so many things. So it's the school, it's access to the community, it's access to services, and you know, young people who, I mean, kids know they want to be in school, and so seeing people going to school every day and being told you're not good enough, you're not. I mean, this is the message that you're putting out, is that disabled students don't have a right to education, don't have a right to be in the classroom. You're not willing to do anything to support them, and I mean, it's a violation of children's rights and human rights. I mean, you know, and this government is just allowing it to continue, and so I think it's an urgent issue that needs to come to committee today.
Okay. Thank you. So the topic was going to come to committee today. There wasn't a question whether it was going to come to committee. It was in our committee business to have this conversation. The question right now is about the extension of the time. So, MLA McDonald, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue we have is we have somebody on strike, and they have the legal right to strike because they didn't agree with what their bargaining unit bargained. It's HRCE and it's the union. It's not this government. Those are the two that are negotiating, or I should say should be negotiating, and I will be very happy when they're back at the table doing it. So for that point, I'm not going to vote to extend a meeting to discuss something that actually is in the middle of a strike and interfering in collective bargaining.
So, MLA Coombs.
I'm just going to say this. First of all, and to my colleagues, I am going to say I'm respectfully going to apologize to this. But under the Education Act that the Liberals proposed, under their wage freezes and ending the strike, or ending potential strikes with Bill 148, but with another bill, it meant education was now under the purview of the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development, not HRCE's. sorry to say, but that was what it says in the Act. The other thing is the Human Resources Committee, we deal with education as part of Human Resources. That means, under that, guess what? This is our problem here. We have to deal with 5047. We need to have fair collective bargaining process, and that's what they deserve, that's what the kids deserve. And another aspect of this, we're asking for an extension of the meeting till 3:30. 3:30, extension of the meeting to deal with my letter that the chair has decided to leave till the end of the meeting. So I'm asking for an extension to deal with my letter, with, yes, does involve 5047. That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
MLA LaChance, did you have one more comment? I'll allow for one more comment, and then we just need to respect our witnesses, our people who've come to visit us today about a different topic, and we need to move on to them. So I'll give you one last comment.
I mean, thank you. So I think, to respond to MLA McDonald, what is in all of our purview as legislatures, we are all duty bearers under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We all have a responsibility for all children in Nova Scotia to ensure that their right to education, and particularly the best interests of the child, are respected, and we are not doing that. So I think we definitely owe this community 30 minutes of our time today. So we'll address the motion to extend the meeting till 3:30. We want to be respectful of everybody's time here today. So there's a motion on the table. And no further discussion. All those in favor of that? Recorded vote? We have a recorded vote.
Okay.
Ready? MLA Sheehy-Richard.
No.
MLA Ritzy.
No.
MLA McDonald.
No.
MLA Smith.
No.
MLA Ince.
Yes.
MLA Nickel.
Yes.
MLA Coombs.
Yes.
And MLA LaChance.
Yes.
And the chair, MLA Palmer.
No. So we will continue that conversation at our committee business. And right now, I'd like to welcome all of our guests here today. Thank you for coming. Looking forward to our conversation. I would like to ask all of you to please remember when your name is addressed, that's when you go speak. Wait till I address you. And we will begin with opening statements. And I'll begin with Ms. Roberts.
Thank you very much. Nourish Nova Scotia was founded to support the rollout of universal school breakfast programs. The founders were driven by the evidence that children cannot learn if they are hungry, and by a vision of a Nova Scotia where children and youth are well nourished to live, learn, and play. As spelled out in the Auditor General's report on healthy eating in schools of last September, most breakfast programs now operate 5 days a week and serve healthy food across Nova Scotia. But there are challenges. Since COVID, more programs are relying on prepackaged foods that cost more and may have less nutritional value. Breakfast programs are nominally led, designed to be led, and reliant on volunteers, which is not realistic in many school communities. And in the Halifax region right now, the lead breakfast program organizers are missing from many schools because they are CUPE members, some of them outside this building right now, educational program assistants, librarians, and Schools Plus community outreach workers who play a very important role in school food. What we see and hear across Nova Scotia now in this context of higher food prices and significant child poverty is a clamor for inclusive and universal school lunch. There's not enough time, money, or people power to coordinate the types of programs that people wish for. Need for food access, hunger, is driving high participation rates and high food costs. From region to region, student access to a healthy lunch is varied. In some regions, it varies from school to school. All the same, in many instances, people are making it work with creativity and collaboration, and I want to share quickly some inspiration. At the CSAP's École Secondaire du Clair, Learning Center students work with their teacher and educational assistants to operate the cafeteria. Students, teachers, and even administrative staff from the nearby CSAP office eat there regularly. Berwick Elementary is 3 years into a pay-what-you-can lunch program. At Kings County Academy in Kentville, a Red Seal chef and 2 fairly paid cafeteria assistants, soon to be 3, produce anywhere from 250 to 400 meals daily. Nourish recently hosted a webinar that allowed others to learn from their experience. In Tri-County Regional Center of Education, cafeteria workers are doing more from scratch cooking, and Nourish is supporting with our local food lunch toolkit of recipes and cycle menus, and with the time of our school food outreach worker. And finally, in CCRCE, Northumberland Regional High School's student-led Karma Closet is regularly feeding 50 to 60 students and has dreams, big dreams, to grow a lot of food on the school grounds. And again, Nourish is helping by connecting them with Dalhousie's Faculty of Agriculture and with some donations. Each of these examples speaks to the potential of school food to promote learning and a sense of belonging, as well as energy and nutrition. For that potential to be realized equitably, we need significant and ongoing public investment, including in people. Lindsay Corbin, coordinator of the Nova Scotia chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, will speak more to that. First, I'll just quickly clarify for the committee that while Nourish receives significant public funding from the provincial government, Lindsay's role is funded through national foundations that fund the Coalition for Healthy School Food through Food Secure Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. Forgive me, I usually give all our panelists, witnesses, a chance to introduce themselves before we do opening statements. You've, I guess, covered that in your opening statement?
I did.
Ms. Roberts.
That was my opening statement, and forgive me if I misunderstood your directions. I know that we're under some time pressure here today.
No, forgive me, because I was supposed to allow you to introduce yourself first. So,
okay. Thank
you for being here. Before I carry on with our opening statements, I will ask the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves and who you represent, and then we'll go back to opening statements. Ms. Corbin.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Lindsay Corbin, coordinator of the Coalition for Healthy School Food chapter in Nova Scotia, and mother of 2 school-age children.
Thank you. Ms. Halliday.
Sara Halliday. I'm the Associate Deputy Minister at the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Hello, I'm Chris Boulter. I'm the Executive Director of Education, Innovation, Programs and Services at the Nova Scotia Department of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Good afternoon. I'm Allison Power. I am the Breakfast Program Coordinator for the Calvins for Kids Breakfast Program at Calvin Presbyterian Church in Halifax.
Thank you. So we'll go back to our opening statements now. Ms. Corbin.
Thank you so much. I'm here to offer a Canada-wide context as it applies to Nova Scotia, and I have submitted a letter in advance that is part of a national effort to increase federal funding for this important program. As you may know, Canada is the only G7 country and one of the only industrialized countries that does not have a national school food program. Nova Scotia has been a leader in universal breakfast, but the needs continue to outpace government funding. This leads to an uncoordinated patchwork of funding that schools must apply for and still leaves them struggling to keep up. The Coalition for Healthy School Food is the largest school food network in Canada. Formed in 2014, we are made up of over 260 member organizations, including Nourish Nova Scotia, and over 120 endorsers. Together, we advocate for a cost-shared, universal, healthy school food program. We also support replication of best practices for the many diverse programs that exist in schools across the country. The Nova Scotia chapter of the Coalition formed in 2021 and has grown to include over 56 members and endorsers, including NSTU, Union of Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, and the IWK. At the national level, the Coalition for Healthy School Food works closely with Minister Karina Gould's team as they work towards their school food mandate. We've always relied on evidence and best practice to guide our work, which is reflected in our 8 guiding principles. We're happy that these principles have been reflected in the discussion paper that the federal government used for consultation on their school food policy. And the timing of being asked to speak is perfect because through this connection, we've developed our current strategy, which includes the letter I've submitted to this committee. The Nova Scotia Coalition for Healthy School Food is ready to work alongside the Nova Scotia government as we figure out the best options for school food in this province. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Halliday.
Thank you, and I'm going to deliver opening remarks on behalf of myself and Chris from the department. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon about the school breakfast program. We're very proud of our school breakfast program and look forward to having a conversation with you about it. I just want to thank Dr. Chris Boulter sitting beside me today for coming with me. Chris's portfolio includes breakfast programs, and I'll also say on a personal note, I am optimistically on the end of a cold, and so my voice has been failing me, and I'm going to let Chris do a lot of the heavy lifting of talking today. And on top of that, he's very knowledgeable about the supports and services that are available to the students in our public school system. We all want Nova Scotia's children to reach their full potential, and we know that unfortunately for some young people, food insecurity is a reality. School breakfast programs are one of the ways we support students, so when they arrive at school, they have the opportunity to start their day with a nutritious breakfast ready to learn. This support is important for the department because we know that proper nutrition plays a significant role in creating the conditions for student learning and achievement, as we've already heard this morning. Breakfast programs are funded through our School Healthy Eating Program, or we refer to that as SHEP. As many of you know, the province has been funding breakfast programs since 2005, and in 2018, the government increased funding to allow every school to offer a breakfast program in the province. The department works closely with the Regional Centres for Education, the CSAP, and Nova Scotia Health to ensure that students receive healthy, nutritious food in our schools every day. The Auditor General was very complimentary of our school breakfast program, and with good reason. It helps students start their day with healthy food provided in a non-stigmatizing way. This is an extremely important component of our school breakfast program. Our schools, educators, and administrators are always on the lookout to ensure that students are supported. If a student needs food, we will ensure that they get food. We also know throughout many schools in our province, they are finding unique and innovative ways to provide access to healthy, nutritious food for students. We hear of many schools that are leading initiatives or working with community partners, and again, we heard some of those this morning. Another example, a middle school in the South Shore has a free salad bar that is accessible to all students. In Dartmouth, there's a food pantry that is accessible and free to all students. Earlier this spring, the Department of Agriculture collaborated with our department and Nova Scotia Health to launch a fresh food pilot in 5 schools across the Chignecto Central Regional Centre for Education. So that's at Spring Hill Junior Senior High, Tatamagouche Regional Academy, Elmsdale District School, GR Saunders Elementary in Stellarton, and the Winding River Consolidated in Stewiacke. The program includes large portable salad bars containing Nova Scotia grown carrots, cucumbers, lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, onions, apples, and other seasonal produce. They are available to students at lunchtime on Tuesdays and Thursdays each week. I just want to take a moment to share a couple of the comments that we've received about that program so far. So Lauren Brown, a grade 10 student at the Spring Hill Junior Senior High, said, "There are vegetables here I never get to have at home. I'm going to come every day it's open." And Faith Atkinson, a grade 11 student at the same school, commented, "I can't believe we get the chance to eat all this fresh food. That's amazing. Can we do this all the time?" The excitement from these students is a testament to how impactful school programs are. A number of schools in the South Shore have added fresh fruit in their classrooms this year. And earlier this spring, fruit bowl pilots were added at high schools in Tri-County Regional Center for Education and Cape Breton Victoria Regional Center for Education. This is a great way for students to have easy access to a quick and nutritious snack throughout the day to support their learning. School food programs are one way that schools intersect with a variety of community resources to provide support to young people. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with the committee today, and we'll look forward to your questions after.
Thank you, Ms. Halliday. Ms. Power, last but not least.
Thank you. On June 10th, 2022, Reverend Nick Phillips, a friend of mine in Sydney Mines, posted the following story on his Facebook page, and I quote, "Wednesday mornings, I help out at the local elementary school breakfast program. It's nothing fancy, yogurt, cereal, milk, apples, cheese. Simple grab-and-go type foods that kids can quickly eat. This week, there was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. She came in quietly, asked for some food, and ate quietly, right next to the table I was serving from. Most kids grab some food, then head off to the other side of the cafeteria with their friends. But she stayed very close, closer than any kid I've ever seen. And she came back for seconds. Then she came back for thirds. This girl was tiny, about as big as a minute, and she was hungry, very hungry. Over 40% of kids in my town live in poverty. I've known this stat for several years. I've quoted it in sermons and public meetings I attend. And now I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen the impact it has on children as this little girl ate her fill for breakfast. It is so sad that this is the reality for many children in my town. Schools do what they can. They offer breakfast. They have ways in which kids can get lunches. But summer is coming. The schools will be closed, locked up tight. This post had a significant impact on me as I thought to myself, that little girl is right here in my community. She lives in Fairview, Clayton Park, Westmount, and many neighborhoods in Nova Scotia. And the question haunted me, who will feed this child when school is closed? What happens on Saturday and Sunday each week, and holidays and in-service days? What will happen in July and August when schools are closed for 2 months? Move forward to Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. This would be the first day of the Calvin for Kids breakfast program, hosted by Calvin Presbyterian Church. Between June 10th and July 2nd, I sent communications to the community schools in our area and reached out to the Fairview Family Resource Center. We wanted to reach families with food insecurities to help provide breakfast foods for the summer. Each week, families would register to come and pick up breakfast foods for their children for the coming week. We provide cereal, pancake mix or oats, juice, a can of fruit, a sleeve of arrowroots, a bunch of bananas, bread, and 5 snacks per child, like granola bars, applesauce, oatmeal cookies, for example. We've also since added a dozen eggs per week. We do not make the breakfast for the families. We provide the foods to them so that they can have the means to make breakfast at home. Originally, the thought was that the breakfast program would run for the 2 months over the summer while the schools were closed. However, over the summer, we had the privilege of getting to know the families and quickly realized that this was an ongoing need. If we stopped, we would be taking food away from children. So in late August, we decided to continue with the program and have provided breakfast foods to families every Saturday since. This has enabled the children we serve to have breakfast at home and go to school with full bellies. It also allows them to have food on the weekends and holidays and in-service days. We know we are not just feeding children breakfast. We know we are feeding families, and that the eggs we provide may or may not be used for breakfast, but could also be used for supper. Our goal is to ensure that children have a breakfast at home so that they are equipped to learn when they arrive at school. We started our Calvin for Kids breakfast program with 9 families with 21 children. We are currently serving 21 families with 47 children. We work with the Fairview Family Resource Center, and we receive requests for help of friends of our breakfast program families. And we've also received a referral from a neighboring church. Our team also provides food at a 24/7 food cupboard for the community, which is located on the site of the church. A couple of our families were met there when they were visiting the food cupboard with their children. The prices of food have increased since our program started, which, being a nonprofit organization, can have an impact on our ability to serve. We have been fortunate to have congregational, community, and some grant support to allow us to continue to serve the families that have come to us for help. My bigger concern is how many are we missing, and who is going to feed the children in Halifax and across Nova Scotia in a few weeks once the schools close for the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Power. So that concludes our opening statements. I'll maintain a list of questions and MLAs who will be asking you questions this afternoon. So forgive me if sometimes it's hard to kind of keep track of all the hands going at one time, but I'll keep a list, and then they'll direct their questions to you. So at this point, we'll now begin with our questions, and we'll begin with MLA Coombs. And we will end our questioning at 2:45.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I have 1 and 2 in my riding who live in poverty. I have 1 and 3 also in my riding. My riding is split into two different aspects. So I have 1 and 2 families living in poverty, and I have 1 and 3 kids living in families living in poverty in either side of my riding. And I see the heartbreak in my office all the time. And so I'm wondering, this is to Nourish Nova Scotia and to Calvin Presbyterian Church. Can you talk about the benefits of thoughtful, sustainable funding to organizations such as your own? And I do have a follow-up.
So that question is directed to Nourish Nova Scotia?
And Calvin.
Okay. Ms. Roberts?
Thank you for the question. I'd say that it's not just, the benefits aren't just for funding to our organization, but to schools and school food budgets, which is, why Nourish is a founding member of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which has been asking for a federal investment so that there can be a cost-shared public investment in school food. I mean, the benefits are so many. One thing, when people talk about food, people talk about folks being hungry. There's like an idea that you can, think about calories, nutrition, that it's just about food, but it's not just about food, especially in the context of schools. And this is why universal school food programs are so important, because being fed and being nourished in a way that isn't stigmatized, where you're not identified as the kid that needs the lunch, is so important to a child, to a learner, feeling like school is a safe place where their needs are met. And if those needs aren't met, then it's very difficult to do the work that they are supposed to do at school. And around the world, this is so normal, right? Like in Japan, in Bermuda, in Cuba, in France, we send kids to school for 7 hours a day. Why wouldn't we be feeding them there? And also, gathering together over food is part of building that school community. And then there's the additional potential benefits when you start to think about food like that. There's so much potential for learning how to prepare food, learning how to be a member of a community that helps to clean up after the meal, I talked earlier about how breakfast programs are designed to be run by volunteers, and how that is really not realistic. And in fact, it's not what's happening in many, many schools, which is why the fact that in Halifax right now CUPE members are out on strike is so challenging, because they particularly play a significant role in running a lot of school food programs. But the other way that schools get around the need for volunteers is actually supporting youth to really be leaders in school food programs. And particularly in Nova Scotia, we often have like a junior high located really close to an elementary school. Sometimes they're across a parking lot. Well, if you can support the junior high school students to become the leaders in providing, supporting breakfast programs for younger children, like that is a beautiful space where people find their own potential for leadership and feel recognized and develop relationships with the adults who are supporting them. So yeah, there are many benefits, and certainly consistent and adequate funding is a part of that. One thing I'll mention is that there have been some infusions of dollars, particularly this year, where like the demand for school food has been much greater, and schools were at risk of running out of budget. But sometimes if that budget isn't attached to someone whose job it is to coordinate food programs and like really to plan for how to run a program, the money can be less well spent than ideal, because it's coming at short notice, or there's a short time in which to spend it.
Thank you. And Ms. Power, would you like to answer that question?
So in regards to funding, we're a not-for-profit, so our funding basically comes from our church budget. My team gets an allocated amount. And then we have to rely on community donations or congregational donations. And we've since had to go out and look for grants that might help us, like neighboring, the Halifax West Ecumenical Food Bank has partnered with us a few times to help us, because the prices of food has gone up and our families have increased. So it's funding is important, but we don't have a source of funding. We've just been very fortunate that people have learned in our community about our program and are willing to support.
Thank you. And just a reminder to all of our committee members, as per the practice of our committee, I will allow for a follow-up as long as it's pertaining to the original question, looking for clarification or something. If I feel that it's a chance to sneak a second question in being respectful of all our committee members, I will ask that's deferred to another round. So, MLA Coombs for a follow-up.
Yes, to Nourish Nova Scotia, is the current school's breakfast funding sufficient?
Ms. Roberts?
So the school healthy eating program budget is $1.7 million a year. No, it's not sufficient, and as I referenced, we heard that an additional $2 million was dispersed in January. We know that, and there were additional disbursements that have happened. We know that principals are using all kinds of different budget lines to support school food. We know that, for example, Schools Plus staff who are, in schools aiming to support a range of outcomes for learners related to a range of issues, including housing, including justice issues, et cetera, that a lot of their time is actually spent on trying to support food access. So no, the budget is not enough, which is, and part of the response to that should be coming from the federal government, but there's also room for the provincial government to support with more continual increased spending on school food.
Thank you. MLA Ince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We know that currently there is a challenge with health care, and the government is focusing on that, and I applaud them for that. But we also know that within that, social determinants of health and food insecurity are part of the health. We also know that 1 in 4 Nova Scotians are food insecure, while 1 in 3 children are food insecure. And we also know that this is important. The impacts are devastating on children that don't have equitable access to food. So my question will be to the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. Is there serious concern about a healthy lunch program and a universal child care program?
So which of our panelists would like to take that one? Okay, ADM Halliday.
Thank you. I might just give a couple opening comments and then pass it over to Chris, who might have some more detail. So I think we have mentioned maybe at this committee before, as well as public accounts, that we were very interested in the federal government's commitment around a lunch program. Our minister has had conversations with her federal counterpart on numerous occasions to ensure that they're aware of Nova Scotia's willingness. We believe that we are in a good position to take advantage of moving forward with any frame or approach being considered by the federal government. With that said, I might just hand it over to Chris to add to that answer.
Dr. Boulter?
Thank you. In addition to that, as Sara has said, we've put up our hand. We've said we want to be first. We feel we're the perfect size and have all the infrastructure in place to be first out of the gate with a universal lunch program for sure. Again, Sara has mentioned that the minister has had some conversations already with the federal minister. I'm part of a committee who's had some conversations as well, and we continue to reiterate that we want to be there, and that is as soon as they're ready, we're ready. At the same time, I also wish to restate that in the interim, when students arrive at school and they need food, they get food. So first and foremost, as you mentioned, the social determinants of health include that you can't learn and feel safe if you're hungry. So there's no school in the province right now where a student would come to school, need food, and not receive it. So there certainly are a variety of means right now by which schools ensure that students get food, both universally for breakfast and lunch as needed. For example, there are 3 different grants that total about $6 million provincially, $5,000 plus $1 per student. Those include the Student Success Grant, the Healthy Living Grant, and in addition to that, the Healthy Schools Grant. So that's $5,000 plus $1 per student. So a lot of those funds are allocated by schools to ensure that any student who needs a lunch, gets a lunch. So I wanted to add that piece in addition to what Sara said, and again reiterate that we are ready to go with the universal lunch program, and are working with our federal counterparts to do that as soon as we're able to. Thank you.
MLA Inns for follow-up.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate all the work. And however, I know for a fact that there are students, while we can talk about this, are going without food. So my question would be, you've mentioned an intern program. So my question is, what are you doing with that program, and are you going to expand it? Because as Ms. Power had indicated, the summer is coming, the schools are closing. So what are you doing in that instance?
Dr. Boulter?
Thank you for your question. So I'd like to share a number of different pieces here. The first one, Schools Plus was mentioned earlier. So Schools Plus is obviously a support within schools, but it does operate 12 months a year. So during the summer, there are camps that Schools Plus run for identified students, and certainly when students arrive at those camps during the summer, food is provided. In addition to that, Schools Plus takes referrals in July and August. So the referrals don't just happen from September to June. So in a particular case, if a family was food insecure and needed immediate support, they could reach out to the Schools Plus program at their child's school during the summer. Schools Plus would respond in a variety of ways, including connecting families to existing supports within the communities. There are many times where they will provide transportation to a family, to perhaps a family resource center or a food bank to get food. And in other cases, they would simply buy them groceries. So there's a variety of means through July and August, through which that occurs. And that's really the work of Schools Plus during the summer. In addition to that, and it was mentioned during weekends as well, many schools do have programs that go under a variety of names, but have some common attributes. They're called things like pantries, free stores. Oftentimes schools will have individual names for them, but at the core of these, schools provide opportunities for students to just go and take food home. So there are backpack programs that I'm aware of, where on a Friday a backpack gets filled with groceries and the student takes it home to the family. More on the secondary side, there are free stores where students can just walk in and just pick up whatever they like when they like and just take it home. So certainly those are two different opportunities that schools would provide, to ensure students not only receive food while at school, but work on food security outside of the school hours as well. And of course, we're always willing to work with partners in this area. We all have a common goal of supporting students and their families, and that's what we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boulter. MLA Sheehy Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm really pleased to be here discussing this topic today. It's really important and passionate to me, having provided childcare in my home for 16.5 years. I understand the importance of providing kids with healthy food, because the happier their bellies are, the happier the days always went. And when I look at what Nourish handed me, and students come to school hungry for many reasons, it's so very true. So it could be, it could be any and all of these things, or combinations of both. And I also, just from your opening remarks, you can see how what works in my school system, AVRCE, doesn't maybe necessarily work. Some of the opportunities like the Calvin Presbyterian Church offers doesn't necessarily always work in rural Nova Scotia, because we don't necessarily have church close and capacity-wise to do those kind of things. So I think it's really important to express how important all of these people and communities, Schools Plus, and organizations come together to work with the federal government to address this very important topic. So yeah, I'm proud of the work that my center is doing, and I look forward to what's next. And on that, can you talk a little bit about what some things are that maybe are already being expanded across foods in our schools?
Dr. Boulter.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to add a little, or perhaps a few more details to what was already discussed with the salad bar pilot. So we're very excited about the work and the partnership with the Department of Agriculture around salad bars. And forgive me for just a moment, but I'll pull out some statistics while I'm here. It's must be the one on the bottom. Sorry about that. There it is. So as previously mentioned, right now we're running a salad bar pilot in 5 schools in the Chignecto Central Regional Centre for Education, and it's about 9,300 students, in fact, are impacted by that right now. So some of the exciting pieces about what we're doing in partnership with agriculture is there's a focus on eating local and procuring local. That's very important to us. In addition to that, there's infrastructure that's left behind. So even once the pilot itself concludes, the equipment for the salad bar remains. In addition to having the equipment and the necessary training about the specifics of food service, with a serve yourself salad bar, there have been education pieces as well. So we didn't just put the salads in. In addition to that, teachers in those schools also did specific lessons around salad bars as well. And we know we've achieved a lot of success with that. We're excited about it. We are expanding salad bars to the Strait Regional Centre for Education in the fall. We anticipate 8 schools that will participate in the Strait region. We're learning lessons as we go. We're building capacity and infrastructure around, providing access to fresh fruits and vegetables that are procured locally. So that's one example. I'd also like to share with you some fruit bowl pilots that are currently happening throughout the province as well. Currently, we're running 2 different fruit bowl pilots. They're taking place in the Tri-County Regional Centre for Education. There's 7 or 8 schools there, about 3,000 students, and also in Cape Breton, and we're impacting about 4,700 students there. So in those particular pilots, what happens is there's fresh fruit that's at a central location in the school. Again, it's secondary school, so the students are a bit older. So a student goes down to the area, they get a bowl of fruit, and they bring it back to the classroom. And whatever class students are in, they just have access to fresh fruit all day. So we're doing an audit in terms of waste in regards to the success of the pilot as well as measuring the quantity. And I can tell you it's been highly successful and very well received. So those are 2 different examples, certainly of where we're going with food. In addition to that, we certainly continue to do work on the new school food and nutrition policy. At a previous event, we had stated that we believe the policy will be ready by the end of 2023. We do believe that we're still on date and still on time and still on schedule for that. So far, there's been a number of engagements with some of our key partners around the school food and nutrition policy. There's more engagement to happen. For example, we want to work with Nourish Nova Scotia on that as well. So we've certainly worked with Department of Health, Public Health, and Department of Health and Wellness as we take a hard look at what the Auditor General's recommendations were and ensure with the new food policy that we meet all of those recommendations. So those are a few examples of where we're going with school food.
Thank you, Dr. Boulter. MLA Sheehy-Richard for a follow-up.
I do just have a quick follow-up. So on the food nutrition policy of 2023, are we looking at maybe by fall that coming out, or hopefully just by something that you can elaborate on a tiny bit more would be great.
Dr. Boulter?
So there's actually 2 parts, and thank you for your question, of the school food and nutrition policy. There's the policy itself, but in addition to that, there's a supporting document that will be called the Food and Beverage Standards, which is actually a more robust document that really fills in the gaps of exactly, it's all the reference points and resources to implement the policy. So what we're looking at right now, and again, we've made a lot of progress on this to date. I want to be clear, we're not done the first draft yet, nor did we think we would be at this point. We do still anticipate that we will be ready to release this policy either near the end of the 2023 calendar year or the start of the 2024 calendar year. So sometime next year during the school year, we believe we're going to be ready to have this policy out.
Thank you. MLA Lachance.
Thank you. I wanted to touch base on the effect of the current job action in HRC on food access for students. So, there's hundreds of students who are not currently in school. They're not able to attend school. Do we have information on how many of those students would also be accessing food programs, breakfast, lunch, what have you? And then also you talked a lot about Schools Plus, but of course in HRC that's not operational. So if we have hundreds of students who are not currently in school because of the current work action, the current job action, how many students in HRC are now without their Schools Plus services now? And we're staring down at summer coming along. So I'll let you respond.
Ms. Halliday?
So thank you for the question. The breakfast programs in HRCE are still all operating in the schools. So the schools may have made some adjustments depending on their individual circumstances, but the programs are all still running. And with respect to students who are not currently in school to access that program, I know the schools are working closely with the families and on those individual circumstances. The school breakfast program is a universal program. So the program and the food are available to every student who's registered in the school or who's at school on any particular day. So as far as speaking to a number of who's accessing or who's not, it's available to all the students when they are in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily LaChance for a follow-up.
Yeah, so I did have a question that was a second part of the question, which was about the impact of Schools Plus not running. So you've said that schools are working with individual families. How are they doing that if Schools Plus workers are not available to do that work right now?
Ms. Halliday.
So I know that HRCE and the individual schools are working with each family individually. There might be different supports put in place. It would be, I don't have a blanket response for you on that, but it would be sort of individualized to the circumstance.
Thank you. MLA Nickel.
Thank you. Well, as I sit here listening to everyone speaking, you certainly defined the term piecemeal. And we're talking about food and the meal. So great that everyone's doing things and we're trying to understand how it's sustainable. I think there's two people, I think, here that are bound by the Education Act to educate each and every child in Nova Scotia. And having them nourished is giving them that fair chance to that education. And that needs to be highlighted. And I think the Auditor General's report came into the department and it noted the delivery of healthy eating in schools. And one key finding was that the department does not know if healthy food is being served in schools and that there is not a universal approach to the program in all the centers of education across the province. So since the release of this report, has the department addressed these findings from the Auditor General's report? Is this the catalyst that had you responding to that now you're saying we're ready to go and we have programs put in place? I just wanted to sort of, as we know each one's doing, I know like Feed Nova Scotia came here and said, I wish that everything was provided to Nova Scotians that would put us out of business. Well, I'd like to put them out of business and have a universal lunch program going forward. But that being said, there's a lot of key pieces that have to be done, and I just want to ask, where are we now? Even to you, Ms. Halliday, when you said that, you quoted one of the children saying, I never get to eat vegetables at home. Did you delve into that as to why that child would say that? As to get to the key reasons as to why they're not getting healthy food? I mean, I have 3 adult children, volunteered through the school, was there with the healthy food being introduced in the high schools. And I can tell you there's a clear path that goes from the school to the Tim Hortons and Wendy's in the Cole Harbour area because they're not eating the healthy food. So that being said, I want to look at this holistically and sustainably at the end of the day, because I know that the minister also said last fall, and I can table that no child in Nova Scotia goes hungry in school. And again, I'm trying to understand with what you're presenting here today, what is actually happening, and are you just responding now to what needs to be done that should have been done a long time ago? I know I support the pre-primary program when that came forward, because that gave everyone a chance, because I know my children had opportunities to go to preschool and were reading by grade primary, but then I found out and I asked the principal, okay, so at what point do the children who don't know how to read catch up to the ones who can read? And they said grade 3 or 4. So that will always, so you want to give them the advantage at a very young age, and food is part of that solution. So I just want to make sure that I'm trying to understand, is it because of the Auditor General's report that you're responding to, or because I'm great to hear Dr. Boulter say that you're ready to go as soon as the feds start to say that they have a plan put in place. So I just wanted to sort of get an understanding of the Auditor General's report and your response today.
So there's a question there for Ms. Halliday.
Both of them.
Okay. So Ms. Halliday, we'll start with you.
Okay. So thank you for your comments. A couple things jumped to mind for me, and I'll pass it off to Chris, but schools are part of the network of support for students. There's a duty of care that schools have on students when students show up at a school for their day. I had mentioned earlier one of the key pieces around the breakfast program is that aspect of it being non-stigmatizing. So, the students who need food, request food, or have the opportunity to access food during the school day. I know it's so important to provide that in a way where a student doesn't have to self-identify as someone that doesn't have access to food at home. And I think I had mentioned that was one of the key pieces of the breakfast program, but also of all the opportunities that Chris was mentioning earlier, where it's a pantry cupboard. There's no one monitoring that. If you need food, you can go and access food. I can just speak from my own personal experience. My son going through the school system, he's in grade 11 this year, but he would be like, oh, it's like, I'm going to run to the breakfast program this morning before I go out on and he probably would have had breakfast already that morning, but the students aren't feeling it's not for me, or they're going, it's there, it's accessible. So I think it's important that we create the conditions to ensure that students feel safe and comfortable to access food. There's many opportunities, and there's the administrators and staff at the schools are doing amazing work, identifying students that might need something in a very non-stigmatizing way. The other piece I just wanted to pick up on from what you had said was, we don't, the comment about the individual, like, we don't have food like this at home. We are an education system, so it is important that embedded in all of the access and delivery of healthy, nutritious food in our schools, that we are also supporting that educational piece, so that as students kind of move through their childhood, adolescence into adulthood, that they are able to take with them the lessons around what it means to have to eat healthy, be physically active, and all of the pieces that go with that. So that's another sort of key tenet for us, is that there is an education component as well. And when we were preparing for this, I was talking about, and I'm going to date myself, but like the home ec classes that we had, where they taught, we learned about those things. I said, this isn't about food, but every time I wash my dishes and I put the silverware and the cups in the hot water first, like, I think about my home ec teacher. And so we know that those lessons live on. And just to kind of pick up on that, I know that was part of what you had chatted about, but maybe I'll pass it to Chris to talk about the Auditor General piece.
Dr. Boulter.
Thank you, Sara, and thank you for your question. So first off, I just wanted to share that the Auditor General's report has been of the utmost assistance, in terms of really being very direct in regards to what the new policy had to address and how we get there. So we're really leveraging that document quite a bit, and we're very focused on meeting each of those recommendations. I did want to share pre-COVID, in fact, I believe it was February 2020, just before March, there was a proposal in then to renew the school food nutritional policy. So this work was being contemplated before the Auditor General's report, though certainly as a result of that report, it's been extremely helpful to us moving forward. So some of the pieces that I also wanted to respond to you with, based on the question, was around the guaranteed nutritional value. You mentioned that as well. And certainly part of what the Auditor General reported back to us is our biggest area of vulnerability in terms of adhering to existing nutritional value standards are third-party providers. And that was very clear in the Auditor General's report, and that is certainly being contemplated within the new school food and nutrition policy. There will be a process by which regional centres attest annually that there is adherence to the policy if they have a third-party provider. In addition to that, we provided direction to regional centres this year. We had some schools that their contract was up with a third-party provider, and we just asked them to extend a year. We didn't want anybody, entering into a new long-term contract with a third-party provider until the new policy came out, and it was very clear exactly what we were expecting of folks who would be offering services within our schools. So again, just wanted to state that we are focused on ensuring that the food served is nutritious, it's at a reasonable price point, and again, really, taking to heart the Auditor General's understanding that there are some vulnerabilities with third-party providers that will need to be addressed, and they certainly will be within the new policy.
Thank you, Dr. Boulter. Our next three questioners will be MLA Ritzie, MLA Smith, and MLA Coombs. MLA Ritzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is directed to Ms. Roberts. With respect to your organization's mandates and goals, can you speak broadly about what steps are taken to ensure no student goes hungry in school?
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you for the question. So we work in partnership with contacts in the public school system. So typically we have a primary point of contact. Often that person is a nutritionist at a regional center of education. In some cases that person is a active healthy living coordinator. And what we do is try to provide resources and help to share learnings across the province so that, for example, we've helped to develop a bunch of recipes for cafeterias. We've packaged them together called the Local Food Lunch Toolkit. So these are a bunch of from-scratch recipes that incorporate local ingredients and can be produced, relatively cost-effectively so that a cafeteria can provide a meal at that low price point, at that accessible price point, and that those recipes are things that kids will actually want to eat. So that's the sort of resource that we provide. I shared with the MLAs a handout on cafeteria challenges and cafeteria kind of strategies. This is based on some recent professional development that we've been supporting in Tri-County, where we call her our school food outreach worker, but really she's just like a cook and an incredible school food champion who has helped to transform the cafeteria services in a number of schools. And she's been doing professional development in a number of, at Digby Regional High School specifically, which is a school kind of similar to the one that MLA Nickel referenced. There's like a pizza shop across the street. There's a bunch of competing alternatives, and so it can be a challenge to get students to stay and to eat the food that is prepared. And so there's a whole series of different strategies, including, offering free samples of the special at lunchtime. And in this case, we worked a lot with, we supported work that was being undertaken by the RCE with the public health nutritionists for that region, and really came in with mentorship and coaching for the cafeteria staff. I think one thing that was really important in that whole circumstance, which harkens back to Chris Boulter's most recent comments, is that in Tri-County, the schools that we have been working with the region to support, all of those cafeterias are actually managed and run by the Regional Center for Education. They're not third-party operated cafeterias. And I think we're getting, it will be interesting to see if we can achieve success with third-party for-profit companies operating cafeterias, because there isn't a lot of money to be extracted from school-age children in the food that you're going to provide them if you want that to be healthy, and there's the way that third-party operators tend to extract profit from cafeteria operations is by paying their workers very little, having them mostly not cooking from scratch, and charging prices where often it does make sense for, particularly for a high school student to go somewhere else, because you can pay $7.25 for a not very good meal, or you can pay $5.50 for a not very good meal, but at a fast food operator relatively close. So it can be a real challenge if schools are not running, or if the regional centers for education are not actually operating those facilities themselves.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roberts. MLA Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is going to be for either of our two representatives from the department. Before I ask it, I just wanted to say that to Ms. Halliday that your comment on home ec shot me back to the fact that I was taught in grade 8 to always wash knives first, and to this day, still wash knives first, make sure you don't get a cut. Mine's going to be a kind of a comparative type of question. So research from the Department of Health and Wellness says that about 40% of kids are using the breakfast program. So my curiosity is, how does that compare with other provinces across the country?
Ms. Halliday? Oh, Dr. Boulter, sorry.
Thank you for your question. So certainly 40% means we serve about 50,000 breakfasts a day, just to put it in some context. So that's, speaks very well, I think, to the universal option. So we certainly, through the policy work that we're currently undertaking and through our partnerships with Department of Health, Wellness, and Public Health, both of which have some folks who sit on federal committees as well. So a lot of the feedback we get about what's happening across the country is actually through our collaborations with health. One of the challenges we have is policies, or lack of policies, there's not great consistency between provinces in terms of what it actually looks like province to province. Some provinces were pretty similar to, for example, we've borrowed some ideas from both Ontario and Newfoundland that were brought to us by our partners in health who sit on these, federal collaborative groups. So in terms of comparison, we have had some challenges in that area. What I will say is Nova Scotia is very fortunate to have a universal breakfast program. Not all provinces do, and we do, and it's been very successful. So we're always looking for good ideas and looking to our neighbors to see what's happening there that we could borrow or take with us. So certainly most of the conversations to date about what's been happening nationally have been through health, who do sit on these federal committees. Yep.
MLA Smith for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Boulter, just to follow up a little bit, and maybe it's more of a comparative type question as well. I heard you speak earlier about the fact that we are ready and we want to be leaders in the universal lunch program. Do we know if any other provinces are in the same boat as we are, that they're ready and just waiting on the federal government to move forward?
Dr. Boulter?
That is likely the case. Certainly what we would say from the Nova Scotia perspective is, given the success of our universal breakfast program, given the partnerships we already have, and even, we established a table this year, just an intergovernmental table where we get together with Department of Health, with Department of Community Services, with Department of Agriculture, with Department of Fisheries. And so we really tried to build some capacity capacity, this year in particular, to ensure that we have everything in place to argue that we should be first. In terms of population size, we're not too big, we're not too small. Again, we're establishing now that we have excellent intergovernmental collaboration about this issue. We continue to form partnerships, with external groups as well. So I suspect other provinces will also want to be first, but it's our job to make a strong case that it should be Nova Scotia.
Thank you. And I believe, Ms. Corbin, you would like to answer the question as well?
Yes, thank you. So through the National Coalition for Healthy School Food, we certainly, I sit around tables with lots of folks from different provinces and territories. And as I mentioned to the coordinators of the National Coalition, connect closely with the federal government, particularly Mr. Karina Gould's office. So we immediately after the budget was released and there was no mention of school food in the 2023 federal budget, my reaction was we need to get Nova Scotia as a pilot. That needs to be our next advocacy effort. There have been some conversations about pilots, but at this point, Minister Gould doesn't want to ask for any less money because there's concern that the full funding may not come if it starts out with a smaller amount for pilots. So as much as I'm 100% on board that I feel like Nova Scotia would be the perfect spot to do a pilot. It unfortunately doesn't seem like that's going to happen from a federal perspective, but what we do know is that Minister Gould's office, she herself is very committed to this. She has no funding, and what Nova Scotia and other provinces and territories really need to be doing is putting that pressure on the federal government to make good on their promise, which is why I submitted a letter requesting that Minister Drouin write to the Prime Minister, to Mr. Freeland, and copying Minister Gould, of course, but she's very much on board. She's not the one we need to convince. The other piece I'll just mention is related to the national perspective and other governments. We, again, through the Coalition for Healthy School Food, have a very close connection with researchers, particularly some researchers at the University of Saskatchewan. Amberly Roots, for example, they have undertaken case study research recently, part of which they were asked by the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to figure out how much school food is going to cost. This is the multi-million-dollar question. So, and one of the interesting findings in terms of cost that I just wanted to share, because it really illustrates the concept of efficiencies. Like we've talked about, efficiencies in terms of cost and human resources. So what was found was that the overall cost of lunch ranged from, was approximately $6.45 per person. That was just looking at 5 provinces. This is an interim piece of the research. They're still conducting research, including using a case study in Nova Scotia. So that's the average cost of lunch, $6.45 per person. But what was found was, in particular, there was a case study in rural Alberta showing that there was a lower cost of actually providing all meals. So instead of it being $6.45 for lunch, it was $4.47 for breakfast, snack, and lunch because of economies of scale. So those larger scale regional models offer multiple cost savings, and I would be very pleased to connect anyone around the table with the researchers for further information.
Thank you, Ms. Corbin. MLA Coombs, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I want to stay on the lunch program. So we were talking a lot about the federal program. And I'm just wondering, from the department, why are we waiting on the feds? Why are we not taking the lead and creating a universal provincial program here in Nova Scotia?
I mean, if you talk, the minister, I'm sorry, Doctor, you talked about being first. Well, wouldn't that make us first if we started our own universal lunch program here in Nova Scotia?
Dr. Boulter, or is Dr. Boulter? Or Ms. Halliday? Who would like to take that one?
I'll take it.
All right, Ms. Halliday.
So a couple of practical things. We don't necessarily want to get out ahead of the federal government on a universal program because we wouldn't want to do something that would disqualify us from participating in a federal program. But we are, as Chris has mentioned, we are doing things in the area of lunch. We're not, we haven't completely stalled and said we're not moving forward with anything in the realm of lunch because we're waiting on the feds. We are doing some things. We mentioned the salad bar pilots and different things like that. We're working with our partners kind of with different departments across the province to see what opportunities exist. We're trying to get ourselves into a position that we can be the most responsive that we can. So that's sort of the, is there anything to that?
Dr. Boulter?
So in addition to what Sarah's just mentioned, again, just to reinforce that I'm sure almost all, if not all, schools, do offer free meals to students who require them. At the present time, it's not a response directly to your question, I understand, but I just wanted to state again that if a student needs food at school, there is food at school for that student, be it breakfast or lunch. It's very common for schools to use SHEP, School Healthy Eating Program funding. That's directed to breakfast programs. Sometimes they do use some of that for lunches as required. In addition, those 3 grants I mentioned before, that total over $6 million, provincially $5,000 per school for 3 different grants plus $1 per student. Oftentimes schools do choose to use those funds as well for lunches for students who show up and just don't have food and need food. So just wanted to add that piece as well. Thank you.
Thank you. MLA Coombs for a follow-up.
Follow-up, but first I'm going to make a comment. With respect, we've just heard that schools are reaching into other parts of their budget to feed these kids. We also know that teachers and TAs, EPAs, and others working within the school support staff are also reaching into their own pockets to feed these kids. So with respect, I don't think we can say that no child is left behind with regards to food. I don't think we can say that. I think we need to stop saying that because there are children who are left behind. There are children who are not getting food, and that money is not coming out of the provincial budget. It is people finding other places to get that food into those kids' bellies. And I don't understand, so you're going to have to explain, please, to me, how the provincial government of Nova Scotia, through the Department of Early Childhood Education, would be disqualified from a federal program.
Ms. Halliday.
So, sorry, I don't think it's a matter of being disqualified from a federal program, but I know we have had, there have been circumstances in the past where if a province is already doing something, or if what we set up doesn't meet the criteria or the guidelines of how the federal program is rolled out, then we might not fit in. But I guess the point is we don't have specific information about what it might look like from a federal perspective. I've mentioned earlier the minister has been in close and constant contact with her federal counterpart on this issue. I know that she, is very committed to it, and so I think it's just about trying to make sure that we are in the best position that we can be as a province when we know more.
Thank you. Ms. Corbin, you'd like to
Just to share in terms of the next steps that I'm aware of from the federal perspective is that they will release a report on what they heard from the consultations that took place or have been taking place really up until literally this past Saturday. Minister Gould was on a Zoom consultation with students. So that report is expected to be released very soon. They're writing it now, and then the actual policy for school food in Canada will be hopefully released over the summer, although we don't have a firm date. But just to Sarah's point around, when will we know what a federal program and policy is going to look like, that's the timeline that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Our next round will be MLA Sheehy-Richard, MLA Ince, and then MLA Lachance. So MLA Sheehy-Richard.
I heard so much in that last round that I'm not sure which of my one questions I want to get in now, but I think my ears perked up the most at the procurement that you talked about, because I know that, we started in a place where it was all, local and schools, and then we got to a place where it became not as local and in school, and I feel the shift, and I feel the importance of working together with the Department of Agriculture and, their milk programs and these salad bar carts, which are just excellent. And again, I guess I'm grateful because in our community, we do have schools, especially now that COVID is over and we get back into this, where they're growing gardens, they're harvesting, they're setting up their salad bars. So it's all about the educational piece as well. So I guess I'm going to have to stick with the question regarding procurement and how, if we extend the year, how that might play into better facilitating, rolling out more of these pilots as we learn and develop and grow what works in each of our individual centers for education. If you could maybe talk a little bit more about how that could be important to putting this together.
Dr. Boulter.
Thank you for your question. So one of the things we're really excited about is through both the salad bar pilots and the fruit bowl pilots, in addition to strengthening our own relationship with the Department of Agriculture, just department to department, we've also been able to network the regional centers themselves with the Department of Agriculture, which is an area of growth for us. So as we think and move forward and saying what lessons have we learned from the pilots so far, one of the big ones is how do we buy more local? And that is a significant focus of the new policy coming out. We have recently established a partnership with Nova Scotia Loyal through the Department of Economic Development, to that end as well, and looking at some options to continue to grow our practice of procuring locally. So in terms of what's next, of course, what we would want is to continue to build capacity. Again, the example I provided with the salad bar pilot is the equipment and the training stays behind. So we would expect these practices, to continue with that increased capacity. We're certainly interested in continuing partnering with agriculture and certainly other departments as well. Again, as I mentioned, Nova Scotia Loyal is a fairly new relationship that we're establishing, but it's all aimed at procuring locally and improving our practice in that area. And once again, this will be a central tenet of the new food and nutrition policy, as outlined by the Auditor General's report. That was an area of growth for us as well. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, I think, would like to respond to that as well.
Just briefly to comment that, of course, Halifax Regional Centre for Education would be responsible for, maybe 40–45% of the student population of Nova Scotia. And there are particular challenges here when it comes to procuring local. Too often at the level of schools, what you see are like a whole range of piecemeal approaches, everything from Instacart to folks, shopping flyers. So Nourish is working, we're part of a working group along with Feed Nova Scotia, Farmers Markets of Nova Scotia, Mobile Food Market, and Just Food, which is connected to the Halifax Regional Food Policy Group, to establish a Halifax regional food hub, which would help to connect small and medium scale producers from across mainland Nova Scotia into wholesale customers in Halifax or in the Halifax region, and that would include schools, because we know that really for efficient school food delivery, you want the food to be arriving at the door. Like you need your people to be able to cook, not be running around and shopping during the limited hours that you're paid for that day.
Thank you. Emily Sheeher-Sherrod, do you follow up?
Yeah, so I guess just the procurement, so that is like within, like that's all going to fall in line with the other policies that we talked about. Probably, I assume that's all kind of coming together. Is that, and yeah, okay. He knows the record.
All right, thank you, Dr. Boulter. MLA Inns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will go to Calvin Presbyterian Church and to Nourish, Nova Scotia. I'll first start by saying it's interesting that I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all this, because I recall when lunch programs and breakfast programs and food programs began in the early 60s. We are 2023, we're still discussing them. The reason we're still discussing them is because of the siloed approach. We're sitting in this room and I'm looking at all the silos. There needs to be a process where, first of all, the provincial government, who is primarily responsible for education, the federal government is part of that question too. But the heavy lifting is on the provincial government for education. And we had a minister, because of the siloed approach, make a comment that no child goes hungry in a school. Again, that's a statement based on not knowing the full breadth of what you're dealing with. So my question is, do you agree, both Presbyterian Church and Nourish, with the minister that no child goes hungry in a school?
So I'll begin with Ms. Roberts.
Thank you for the question. I mean, the thing about hunger is that it's not something that, you wear on your forehead. And also, the thing about youth is that youth are very aware of their peers and of their social standing. So I've certainly heard stories I think of a conversation that I heard at a meeting of the steering committee of the Nova Scotia chapter for the Coalition for Healthy School Food, where someone shared, their experience with a family where there were multiple children, and the younger children were eating at school every day, and the older children were not eating. And they're all coming from the same household, but the younger children were not so aware of their social standing, were not so sensitive to the stigma of putting up their hand or somehow being identified as needing food, and so they were accessing food at school, but the older children, at the junior high level or at the high school level were not. And certainly from a conversation that I had recently with a high school principal, I mean, we started out having a conversation about their cafeteria and their kitchen, which is currently being operated by a third-party provider that is trying to extract profit by feeding kids not great food at relatively high price points. And literally the first line in my notes is, "We have kids who don't eat." That was what the high school principal said to me. I will say that there is progress happening in Nova Scotia. Right now, there's a job posting in the Annapolis Valley, which is for a permanent position. This is a position that was not a permanent position like a year ago. In fact, I don't know that it was a permanent position 6 months ago, but it's for a regional food coordinator. That is a position, and it's being hired by Annapolis Valley Regional Center for Education. That is what we need if we want to be doing school food in a robust way, in an efficient way, taking advantages of the economies of scale, incorporating procurement, supporting staff to do good work, which includes, producing the maximum nutritious, tasty meals at like the minimum food cost. You need somebody who's actually got that job of being a food coordinator. You need people who have experiences, be it in catering, be it feeding people in long-term care, be it from restaurants. Like, that's a skill set. That is a really valuable skill set that I don't have, but I know people who have it, and they make a huge difference when they come into the school food environments. So I don't know if that answers entirely your question, but thank you for it.
Thank you. And did you, Ms. Power, like to respond?
Thank you. One of the comments that Emily Coombs made during one of her remarks was, I don't think we can say that all children are fed at the school level, that there are children left behind. I see them on Saturdays. I also see children that are 3 years old that are hungry, so they're not even in the school systems. The school system does a great job. I'm not going to say that they provide food as available, and that's great. Different schools that I've heard have different programs. It's not consistent. I do agree with you that it's siloed approached. I agree that people like ourselves, the Calvin Presbyterian, we've seen a need and we went to action. But there is no roadmap to correct the child poverty and the child hunger in Nova Scotia at this point, and that should be a priority.
Thank you. MLA Ince, and we have 5 minutes left, so pass it over to you, MLA.
30-second question. Thank you for that. I'd like to just make a statement that if we are to really address this crisis, because it is a crisis, it's part of healthcare, if we are to really address it, then let me pull back. I've often been confronted with barriers and hurdles myself. Many times, you can't wait. You've got to take action and do it yourself. So for us to be trying to push it back on the federal government, in my opinion, is wrong. We need to take action, and we need to do it now.
Thank you, MLA Ince. MLA Lachance.
Thank you. And I'd like to return to the situation currently in HRC in this community here. I think Ms. Roberts referenced, the 40% of Nova Scotia students that are in this area, so 40% of Nova Scotia students who are being affected by the current job action and who need their school communities strong and back together. And, I think, and I guess, I really want to quantify this idea that all students have access to food, but yet we don't know how many students are being affected by this current job action. It seems that we don't have any data on who's not able to access food because of the current job action. And it's not really clear to me. I mean, there was some reference to individual supports being provided to families, and thinking ahead to summer. And I'm sorry, with all due respect, that's not the reality. I mean, I can tell you that, one of my dear friends whose daughter had a very successful transition to high school, which is currently now being completely threatened. I mean, the whole year is going to be ruined by the current situation. Received one call from the school at that if if their daughter was going to go back to school, they had to go with them. Now, this parent is a single parent and works, and so obviously is not able to go back into school. But there was no other support offered. There's been no follow-up. So, with all due respect, we need to understand who's hungrier now because students are not in school, who's going to remain hungry over the summer, and what is actually the plan to support these families, because right now it's not happening. And people, and this young person's mental and physical health are being very badly affected. And they were also told that if they went back to school, it probably wouldn't work because none of the staff are there and they don't have the supports in place. So this is one example of one child that is suffering in our community right now because they can't be in school. There's hundreds of other stories, and I would argue that there's hundreds of other students that we actually don't have a sense of who's being affected because they can't access Schools Plus. So this all, this many, this a lot, we need numbers, we need data, we need to know what's going on because this is not fair for families.
So, Ms. Halliday, would you like to answer that or respond? You have about a minute.
Okay. I think I will just sort of reiterate what I said earlier. We know that the situation with the strike is disruptive to our schools right now. And we know that there are some students who are not attending our school. With respect to the breakfast program, the breakfast program is still being delivered at school. We know that food continues to be available for those students. I think, you're also speaking to bigger issues related to the job action, and I would, the HRCE is working individually with families. If, they are they are trying to support families. They're trying to bring children back to school as safely as possible. So if any family is experiencing something different from that, then I would encourage them to reach out directly to their school or to HRCE.
Thank you very much, Ms. Halliday. So in the interest of time, at this point, we were going to end our questions, MLA LaChance, at 2:45. Well, we wanted to end our meeting. I mean, you can go as long as you want, if you'd like, but I mean, I'd like to allow our witnesses to have final statements, if possible. And but you want to make a final follow-up? Go ahead.
They don't have to be allowed. My question.
Sorry? Okay. So at this point, we'll allow for our witnesses to offer any final closing comments they'd like. And Ms. Roberts.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Just really briefly, I'll say that, Nourish, what we offer to the silos, be they schools, be they agriculture, be they education, be they PTAs, is our ability and our willingness to connect. In the end, schools are in communities, and there aren't very many successful schools that don't tap into the resources that are around the school, and that includes everything from food producers to kitchens that exist in community spaces for the schools that don't have kitchens, etc. And so that's a role that we're trying to step into wherever we see opportunity. I don't like to see potential go unrealized, and so please, anybody feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Ms. Corbin, did you have any closing remarks?
Yes. Thanks again for the opportunity. Just want to close by briefly stating that the Coalition for Healthy School Food does not believe that school food solves income-related food insecurity. It can, however, take some pressure off the family budget and is part of several coordinated social policies that can address food insecurity more broadly. And the Nova Scotia Coalition for Healthy School Food is eager to support this government in your work to expand school food programs in collaboration with the federal government and on your own. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. I've met with many people from Nourish, Nova Scotia and the Valley, and you're doing great work. Thank you very much. Ms. Halliday.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly say thank you for inviting us here to talk about the school breakfast program today. I think we have a lot to celebrate in Nova Scotia. I echo the comments around education being part of that network of support for students. We want to keep students at the center and make sure that we are supporting them in the best way they can and using the partnerships and the resources that we have at our disposal. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Power, would you like to offer any closing remarks?
I'd just like to say thank you for having me. I'm still not sure how you found me. I feel like the little fish in the big pond. But living in Nova Scotia, I will say children from birth to age 18, if we're going with the school system, they shouldn't be hungry. We shouldn't have this conversation. So it would be nice to see a path forward that without the silos to work together to make that a non-discussion.
Thank you. And I speak for everybody in the committee when we say we're glad the little fish made it today. Thank you for coming. So at this point, we will end our formal meeting with our witnesses. We'll take a 2-minute break so we can allow our witnesses to leave, and then we'll get back to our committee business. Thank you very much. Order. If I could ask our committee members to please return to the table. We'll call our Standing Committee on Human Resources back to order. And in regards to a letter sent by MLA Coombs to our committee, that is I think the only other piece of business. Is there any other business that we would attend to before we kind of move forward with this? Okay, MLA Coombs.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm quickly asked for 15 more minutes on the clock, please.
So are you asking for
A motion for 15 more minutes.
Okay, I think we already had a motion.
That was 30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay, is there any discussion? You have to put a formal motion then?
For 15 more minutes of this committee.
Okay, so there's MLA Lachance, did you want to make a comment?
No, sorry, I was just seconding it.
Seconding, okay. Is there any comments around that? Okay, so there's a motion on the table to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Motion is defeated. MLA Coombs.
Thank you. So yes, in regards to our letter, which you would have received, and I do believe you've also received our motion, with respect to that this department, we deal with the mandate of this committee is to consider matters relative to early childhood development, education, and labor. We've got a hat trick, everybody. And there's 1,800 school support staff are fighting for living wages, and thousands of children are being prevented from attending school. So I move that this committee call an emergency meeting on this matter as soon as possible, per the letter submitted by our caucus, and call the Deputy Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development, the President of CUPE Nova Scotia, Nan McFadden, and the President of CUPE Local 5047, Chris Melanson, as witnesses.
Thank you, MLA Coombs. There is official motion on the table. Is there any discussion around this? Do we have a seconder? Oh, we don't need a seconder. Thank you. I didn't think I did, but I saw someone's hand go up, so I thought that was okay. MLA Nickel, then MLA Lachance, I think, wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, and I won't speak too long, other than to say that we are in full support of this letter going forward.
Thank you. MLA Lachance?
I think, really following the discussion today where we considered what the impact is going to be on these students now, going forward into the summer, on other students, this is a matter of urgency. It's not clear to me how families are going to be supported in HRCE during the summer. It's 40% of our student population in Nova Scotia. I think it's really critical. And I also, I'm sure that you've all received, I think we've received hundreds of letters at this point from both folks who want to get back to their jobs and want a fair deal, but also from families whose children are, I use the word suffering, but we aren't respecting the rights of children in this province right now. And there's a lot of children who are losing a lot of progress. This is an urgent matter. This isn't going to be something that just kind of fizzles out as we get to happy graduations and everyone goes their own way in summer. This is having long-term impacts on children's development and education, and we need to deal with it.
I have MLA Ince and then MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're in challenging times for most citizens on all levels. It's important that we face the individuals who are out there walking the streets and protesting us. When I was a minister, I still went out and walked in the middle of all of this. Couldn't answer all the questions, but I was out there. I didn't shy away from this. So with that, I'm going to ask if my colleagues across the floor will come out and see some of their constituents and put them at ease, at least by meeting them out there. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. MLA McDonald, you got a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just for my colleague, I've talked to the ones that have come to see me, right? I mean, nobody wants a strike, but I in no way want to get in the middle of a negotiated settlement, which is what HRCE and the union team needs to get to. us meddling into it, and that's what it is, in my opinion, is not correct. I do not want to be in the middle of meddling. I have talked to anyone who's come to see me. I've got friends of mine whose children are not in school. I have friends of mine that are on strike. So, and I don't live in HRM, but I live just outside HRM, and a lot of people in my area work in HRM. I'd love to see those two come together, get a negotiated settlement, but it's for them to do, not us to try and mandate. Thank you.
MLA Nickel, did you have a comment?
I just needed some clarification, but I don't know who's going to give it to me, because it's the negotiation is not necessarily between HRCE and CUPE, it's between the Department of Ed and CUPE.
MLA LaChance?
So, I mean, I don't think, I'm not going to clarify, but, you know, I guess just to your point, I really, you know, this isn't about meddling or mandating a settlement, but what it is actually taking into account the short-term and long-term impacts of what is happening and on children in this province. So it is not, you know, I think we need to get these people together to understand what's happening and what, you know, what's going to be happening in the coming months. Otherwise, we're really abandoning a significant portion of our student population.
MLA McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just say that the point of bringing them together to figure out what it is, that is, in my opinion, and I'm not a labor's expert, so I can be corrected if then we're meddling into it. So that's just my opinion. And again, my colleagues on the opposite would have better understanding than I would, but I have a problem with any part of where it's inferred that we're meddling into it. So those are the comments that I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay, so, MLA Sheehy Richard had a comment. You have to allow all members to speak.
I just wanted to say, too, that a legislative committee is not a place that either prior government brought an active negotiation to a committee. A legislative committee, it's not where those negotiations happen. They happen between the employer, which is Halifax Centre Regional Centre for Education.
Time for discussion. This matter is over, and our committee has now come to an end for the day. So our next meeting will be on Tuesday, July 4th for appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions. There are no more topics on the current roster, so our next meeting for topic selection will be September. And have a great summer, everybody. We'll see you in July for agencies, boards, and commissions. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.